Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you to the Free Man Beyond the Wall podcast. This is your host, Pete Quinones. Tom Woods is back on the show. Pretty sure Tom needs no introduction at this point. New York Times bestselling author, host of The Tom Woods Show, and over the last 12 months, he has been one of the greatest voices out there about this COVID madness. Asked Tom to come on today. Try and white pill us. He's been traveling a lot. He's been talking to a lot of people, and he sees hope out there. So I'm just going to let Tom talk, ask a couple questions, and as you know, Tom always brings the goods. So without any further delay, here is Tom Woods. Tom, welcome back to the show. How are you doing?
Doing great, Pete. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on and helping me out today. It's one of those podcasters' dilemma. You get someone, you get someone who cancels, and then it's like, man, I really want to talk to somebody today, though, and I need to put out an episode. Let me get in contact. What?
Yeah, try putting out 5 a week. You find yourself in the podcaster's dilemma quite a bit.
You have a lot to fall back on as far as past talks and stuff like that.
That's true. That's true. Like, I'm still digging out new ones even now. But yeah, no, I'm glad to do it. Even though, man, I am just I've been working kind of hard. I'm just exhausted this morning, but I'm going to do my very best. You're going to get the best Tom Woods 30 minutes of today. Everybody else is getting second-rate Woods.
All right, let's do this then. All right, we need white pills, Tom. Last time I talked to you on the show was in October. A lot of things have changed since. Obviously, the world has changed since then, numerous times over. I know that you've traveled a lot. I just saw you in Auburn this past weekend, and I know it's not the only place you've been. Give us some hope. Tell us about some of the places you've been and how it looks like places are opening up. And I mean, shoot, you're in Florida, so talk a little bit about that too.
Yeah, sure. All right. Plenty to talk about here. Well, one thing that I miss a lot, and probably you do too, is live music. And just the idea that there's just no prospect of it coming back, just it doesn't seem right. So anyway, I'm in touch with a couple of metal people, and I always ask them what's going on and do they anticipate a tour. And I do know there's like a maybe second or third tier metal band, not the one you're thinking of. I'll tell you after. I'm not sure that it's public yet. That is definitely planning to tour this year. They don't care what. Okay, it's not All That Remains, as I wouldn't have described them that way. But because I don't think I'm supposed to know, I better not say it. But anyway, so that got me looking around, and I saw an ad for the Megadeth tour this summer, and I thought that can't be right. This must be dates from 2020, and they just never rescheduled them or something. But apparently they are planning a major tour with 3 other bands. And I thought this can't be. And so they talked to the Megadeth bassist, and he said this. He said that it's at Live Nation just put out this announcement saying all concerts are a go. We're going to stay open. Everything's going to be great. So that was how Ellefson reported it. He says, so per that, hopefully we'll see everybody on tour this summer. We're staying optimistic. It was rescheduled from last summer, so it'd be great if we could just get, remember Dave Mustaine had cancer. Like, this guy wants to get out there. He's not afraid of this is it. Like, this is his second, lease on life here. This is the beginning of the rest of his life. So when I saw that, and I saw the Live Nation announcement and their personnel saying, well, everybody says they're staying open and we're just doing this thing. Well, I don't know. I mean, that made me feel good. So there are still, and where I live in Florida, you can still go to the old venues where you would have had live music, and you still have live music, except now it's all the local bands you would have ignored otherwise are now getting their moment in the sun. But we are up and running. You can have that. You can do that if you want to. Now, meanwhile, it is true that Texas, even though they locked down way more than they should have, and Greg Abbott has managed to upset everybody, whether you're afraid or not afraid. Everybody dislikes Greg Abbott. But then he decided, all right, we're going to no more occupancy restrictions. We're going to have full stadiums. We're opening up. Then Mississippi, then Arizona, then some occupancy restrictions lifted in Connecticut. Indiana, it looks like it's on the verge of dropping its mask mandate. Now, it's true, the masks are still mandated a lot of times in the big counties and stuff like that. But there definitely are dominoes falling right before our eyes. And if, as Martin Koldorf put it, if there's one thing Dr. Fauci is good at, it's notice it's not being an epidemiologist, because that's not what he is. Actually, he's a virologist. But all the same, the one thing he's good at is reading the political winds. And not that long ago, Fauci started to speculate that maybe we could lift the restrictions even before reaching herd immunity. So I think he sees where the way the wind is blowing. And what I think is happening is not so much that a lot of people are starting to come around and seeing our charts, and they realize that the numbers make no sense. If all these mitigation measures are supposed to work, the numbers should not look the way they do. I think it's more that for some people, it's the vaccines. That they're not listening to well, once you get the vaccine, nothing changes. You should still, they're more confident in the vaccine than the vaccine boosters are. They're saying, I got the vaccine. I had this numerous times on a recent trip. I had older people who were just walking around. Now, there are always plenty of older people walking around. These are ones who wouldn't have been walking around otherwise, saying, oh, we feel great. We got our shots. The idea that now they're going to cower in their houses more is just not occurring to most of them. I mean, most of them feel like, okay, that's it. Now it's over. So I don't care what honestly, at this point, I don't even care what it takes to get these people to be reasonable. It does mean that the number of people I now consider to be reasonable in the world is way, way lower than I thought before. But there are definitely signs that things are changing. I'm not one of these people who says, oh, they're never going to lift the restrictions and we're never going to get our lives back, and New York and London are destroyed forever. I'm sorry, I don't buy that. That's unnecessary. That's unnecessary black pill. And I don't think it's well founded, because even starting the beginning of 2021, for the first time in this entire crisis, we started to hear people, including Fauci, use the expression back to normal. They did not use the expression back to normal all through 2020. And you can draw your own conclusion as to why, but they did not use that expression. And now it's the messaging from everybody is just hang on a little while longer. Now, I know they said 15 days to flatten the curve and it's a year. I get that. But I honestly believe they feel like this is slipping away. That yes, publicly, people know they're supposed to wear their mask and be compliant and sing the praises of the public health establishment. But they know behind the scenes, people are going bankrupt. They're hurting. Their kids have nowhere to go. They don't know what to do. At some point, this blows up. And so I think obviously it's going to happen in some states faster than others. It's going to happen in let's say borderline states faster than it will in Washington State or in Ohio. But I see that the trends all going in the direction of getting back to somewhat normal, even if it's much slower than we'd like.
Well, right from the beginning of this, March last year, when I started podcasting on this and really trying to concentrate on what the culture was doing, basically, it looked like they had figured out a way to hack the culture and just get people to want to do this, to participate in this, to not ask questions about it. And I've said right from the beginning, the only way we're going to get past this is if the people, and we don't need, I mean, we know this, we don't need a majority of the people. We need a very vocal minority of the people who are like, look, this is done. It's over with. I saw a great meme yesterday that was just so simple, but it was people in line to check luggage at the airport, and they were standing 6 feet apart. And then it was a picture of the plane.
Yeah, and right.
You're just, I mean, stuff like that is, if that can't, the person that doesn't get through to is somebody that we're not going to get through to. We just have to be able to drown out the voices of those people on Twitter who are, basically saying, oh, this is going to start taking out people in their 20s now.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. I totally agree. It's one-on-one where I find, you can make some, here and there, you can kind of spot if somebody's not on board with the craziness. And that's always fun, actually, out in the wild to discover somebody like that. I was at the Atlanta airport. No, I beg your pardon, the Orlando airport. And they have, it's so amazing. They have a Hyatt hotel physically in the airport. So you go down the elevator from the hotel and you're right at the gate. perfect. So if I have an early morning flight, I don't want to wake up early and drive to the airport and look for traffic. No, I'll sleep over at the airport the night before. And as I was coming out of my room, I'm heading down the corridor, and this woman, probably around 50, starts heading toward me the other direction, and she's not wearing a mask. So she comes up close to me, and she grabs her shirt to put it up over her because she thinks that's a polite thing to do. And I said, don't worry about it. It's all bullshit anyway. And she said, I totally agree. And I just kept on going. It was great. So then the other day we were in Auburn, for the Mises event, and we got in the elevator at the hotel with a woman who didn't have a mask on. She's and the elevator is supposed to be for one party only, because you're going to get the virus in the elevator. So it takes, by the way, there's a 15% chance that if you get it, somebody in your household will get it. Only a 15% chance in your household. So the chance that you're going to get it by a passing encounter in an elevator for 5 seconds is, I would say, pretty low. But anyway, this woman was in it, and she said, I don't mind if you join me if you don't mind. And we walked in there and said, well, it's nice to meet a normal person once in a while. So we all laughed. So I enjoy making those acquaintances. But there are communities all over social media from the different states. There are reopen groups and groups that analyze data, like Catherine Hewig from Ohio, whom I just interviewed. She's doing really great stuff. So you can find other sane people. They are out there, and they will help keep you sane through this whole thing. I did get to go to South Dakota this last year because I was running out of places to go. I mean, I'm a traveler. I love traveling. So 2020 was like a punch to the gut. So as soon as in April 2020, as soon as Georgia reopened for indoor dining and stuff, you and I had lunch, as a matter of fact, because we took a trip up there because I wanted to. I noticed I couldn't go in my own Florida, in DeSantis's Florida. I had to go to Governor Kemp's Georgia to sit down. The first meal we had after all this went crazy was at the amazing Morton's Steakhouse, which they have locations all over the country. Yeah, they're a chain, but they're like a borderline fine dining chain. It's darn good. And we all felt like we were out like doing something mischievous and wrong. What should we really be out here doing? I mean, that was the feeling we all had looking at each other, like, what's going on here? But what fun it was. So once we did that and places started opening up, we started resuming travels. We'd travel around Florida. And then finally it got to be, well, look, I'd never been to South Dakota before. And so we might as well, and I'm never going to want to go again. So at a moment when it's the only place in town, I might as well go do it. So we did that. And I would say that was the lowest mask compliance state of anywhere we had been. Way lower than anywhere. Lower even than Wyoming, where we also went. Wyoming, it was just masks, a lot of masks all over the place. Very surprising. Obviously in Jackson, because that's where all the snooty elites hang out. But we were surprised at how much masking there was. But at the same time in Wyoming, there was a lot of perfectly normal behavior. I mean, again, people were, we ate in a packed, full restaurant with live music. I mean, packed. When we got there, we got to Wyoming. It was a Monday night. We were in Jackson, or so-called Jackson Hole. And we figured we'd just pick some random restaurant. So we showed up, absolutely booked, couldn't possibly get in. Oh, okay. Well, that must be a fluke. So we called another restaurant, totally booked, nobody can get in. Another restaurant, booked, nobody can get in. So our first night in Jackson, Wyoming, we had to eat Chinese food. Now, there's nothing wrong with Chinese food, but when I think Wyoming, my first thought is not, I'm going to go have Chinese food. It just wasn't the sort of thing that occurred to me. But it was the only place we could find a table. And I thought, all right, this place has got the idea. They're just going back to living. And that the attitude was present throughout all of that state and all of South Dakota. I heard people, clerks at behind retail counters saying, look, if I'm sick, I won't come to work. But otherwise, I am pretty sure I'm meant to live and not cower. I'm supposed to live, and I intend to live. And that kind of was the mainstream attitude that pretty much everybody had.
Yeah, I was down in Florida last month, in Ocala and DeLand, and I didn't wear a mask anywhere. There was even a restaurant I was going into that had a sign on the door that said you have to wear a mask even at the table. And I'm just like, I see that and I'm like, screw this. Let's just go in. And no mask, no nothing. They didn't enforce it. And this past weekend in Auburn, when I got there, I was staying in Airbnb, went to grab a little food at Kroger. Kroger had the sign that said mask required. I walked right in without a mask. No one even looked at me. It was it was like they were, I mean, everyone else was wearing a mask, but they were just like oblivious to the fact that I was there. A couple of gas stations that were mask only. Nobody was wearing a mask in them. Even the hotel, the first night that we had that function there, it had, you have to wear a mask on the door, and everybody was walking around without one and everything. I think it's just depending on the area and depending on, unfortunately, the dominant politics, people are going to be less apt to look at those things and take them seriously. And Auburn is a college town, so I'm assuming there's a lot of liberal college kids there, and a lot of those signs are for them. But I think for the most part, like the locals and everything are just like, screw this. I mean, we're not even just gonna not gonna even mess with this.
Well, I have to say that the whole "I'm not going to wear a mask" thing, I totally sympathize with that. I think masks are terrible. They don't do anything. They don't even accomplish anything. After being dehumanizing, they don't even have the decency to accomplish anything. But yet, what I really can't stand is when people who are dumber than I am think they're smarter. This is why I can't stand sometimes looking at Michael Malice's Twitter feed, because he trolls people. And these are people who are way, way dumber than he is, but they think they're getting the better of him. So like he'll say something about when the Nazis built the Berlin Wall. Now, obviously somebody of Malice's intelligence knows the Nazis didn't build the Berlin Wall. And somebody will be avidly correcting him. No, wait a minute, that was the communists. And then he'll keep saying, look, it says right here, I can't for a second have a guy like that think he's smarter than I am. That's just a difference between Malice and me. Well, likewise with the mask, since they've all been trained to think that people who wear masks are saving lives and they're following the science, and people who don't are stupid and backward, I don't want people dumber than I am to think they're smarter. You know what I mean? So that annoys me about this. So you just don't care? Because for some reason that bothers me. That bothers me that these people will think they're being responsible and I'm being a bad person.
All right, don't fast forward this. I'm following up from about a month ago when I was talking about going to 5 shows a week and what I would need in order to do that. I have set up a page. It is freemanbeyondthewall.com/goal. It explains everything. It explains exactly what I would need to be able to do this full time, to do the podcast, to do the writing, and to do the documentary filmmaking full time. And the goal is there, and there is a link to all of the places that you can support me. I would love if you supported on freemanbeyondthewall.com/store, because then it takes the Patreon to the world out of the picture. So freemanbeyondthewall.com/goal. Thank you very much. I picked up on that pretty early on, and I think even Malice was talking about it. He was saying that because most people have nothing going on in their life other than going to work, taking the kids to soccer practice, rinse, repeat. When this came along, especially for people on the left end of the spectrum, it was like they were their great grandparents or their grandparents fighting World War II and fighting the Nazis. We have an enemy to defeat, and I'm going to do my part, almost like Starship Troopers. I'm doing my part. And that wore on me a lot early. And it was just like, please, don't do this for me. Yeah, that whole martyr complex was the thing that killed me. And I think that is more people are reacting to that. Like, so if you see somebody with a martyr complex on Twitter, they're usually getting piled on now. And that gives me hope, because a year ago, you didn't really see that. It was everybody was being careful. And then once you figured it out, that it's like, wait a minute, this is only really attacking people who are really infirmed and really old. We really need to chill out. And, people just kept on with it, because in many cases, it just gave them a sense of purpose, especially if they're not going to work. And if they're not, they're getting their livelihood is being destroyed. Any kind of savings they have is being destroyed. At least they're doing their part.
Yeah, and I suppose for some people who can't, frankly, be original enough to wonder if maybe the stuff they're being told is BS, nevertheless feel like, well, as long as I'm being ruined, I might as well, it might as well be for a good cause. I might as well throw myself into it completely. But it just astonishes me that people whose livelihoods center around big crowds, for example, avoid crowds is one of the pieces of advice because it'll be a super spreader. And then, basically it never is. But there are people in entertainment and in all kinds of, even small crowds, like children's birthday party businesses, where you bring horses to a child's birthday party, that sort of thing. These things have been decimated and destroyed. And yet, see, if that were me, my business was not destroyed. If anything, I did better in 2020 than I did in 2019. So it's not like I'm just, I have a financial interest in this, like I'm getting ruined, and so I'm going to come up with any old phony number to justify lifting the lockdowns or whatever. I'm doing great. So that's not what's happening in my case. But yet, if I were one of these people whose businesses are being destroyed by the lockdowns, you better believe I would search high and low, look at every chart I could find to see if maybe there was the slightest chance that this thing wasn't as bad as they've made it out to be. It just seems like anybody would do that, just out of curiosity. Well, let me just see. Let me see if there are any competing voices out there who may have another point of view. I don't know why more people wouldn't do that. I mean, right? Isn't that better than having your life ruined? It's so weird.
Yeah, people are just, I think people just aren't curious. And I think, a lot of people on our spectrum, libertarianism, whatever, narco-capitalism, we're just naturally curious. And we also want to be right. So if we see something out there that's being reported as a fact, we're probably more apt to go and investigate it and try and tear it apart and see if it's true. And, once you started tearing everything apart from last year, you're like, wait a minute, there's so many inconsistencies here. They've contradicted themselves over and over again. The numbers they're reporting just don't seem to add up. And we went after it. And, probably one of the things that upset me more than anything in the last year was how many people in the libertarian sphere actually bought into this. And not only, and a lot of them, I don't think bought into it because they actually believed it. I think they're like, okay, I know that this is going to have no effect on me. I'm 35 years old. I'm in perfect health. This isn't going to affect me at all. But I think a lot of them cared about optics because they're so used to pandering to the left of the political spectrum that it's like, well, I'm going to wear my mask wherever I go, and I'm going to be seen wearing my mask wherever I go because I want these people to know that I'm a good person. And I mean, people who are far left, that doesn't really, I don't care if they think but they already think I'm a bad person. The only thing that I can do to convince them and completely bend the knee to them, and I'm not bending the knee to anyone.
Yeah, I hear that. I almost feel like I wish I could frankly, I wish I could just hand out copies of my ebook to people. Says just look at the charts. As soon as they challenge me on the mask, just hand them the book and say, just look at the charts. You show me where the masks are doing anything. I mean, so by the way, since I was on last, I produced I think a much better ebook than my first one. And this was not even my idea. It was somebody who follows me on Twitter said, you generate or you reproduce all these really good charts, showing that what they said would happen didn't happen, or there are three places with radically different policies that next to each other, but they have the same curve, whatever. This is all very interesting stuff, but what you need to do to get maximum impact is put a whole bunch of these charts side by side in one single presentation, like an ebook. And I thought that is what I need to do. Because to me, the charts speak 1,000 words. The charts they just crush the whole thing. And what I been saying recently is I want to see us develop quizzes that the other side always gets a 0 on. So, okay, here are a dozen Midwestern states depicted on this graph, but I'm not going to tell you which is which. So one of them's had no state level restrictions for 6 weeks. Can you pick it out? Tell me which line that is. Of course, they have no way of knowing because it's exactly like all the other lines. Or Arizona, California, Nevada. If you look at their curves, almost identical. almost identical. And Nevada did not lock down as hard as California, and Arizona even less still. Same curves. The trajectories are the same. So I would say, all right, pick out which one locked down the hardest, just without labeling them. Pick it up. And of course, they won't know. How are they going to know? So that's kind of what the ebook is called, COVID Charts CNN Forgot. And I put it up at chartstheyforgot.com. That stuff, I honestly, I would like to, either that or a t-shirt. I'd like to have a t-shirt with graphs on it or something, like this, just so that I've got an answer for these people, really, because I want them to know you're not only obnoxious, but you're dumb. Like, you haven't even bothered to look. Plus, I feel like you don't even need to look at charts. Just knowing that everywhere you go in a lot of major cities, everybody's wearing a mask. So the idea that the 0.00001% of people who aren't wearing a mask are responsible for the ongoing spread of the virus is not plausible. I mean, no reasonable person would find that plausible. So even without seeing any charts, wouldn't you ask after a while, maybe this just doesn't do any good? I mean, are you really reduced to the pathetic argument that, oh, it would have been much worse without the, okay, so you're just going to assume that this works? You're not going to look at any experience whatsoever. New Jersey had one of the earliest mask mandates. They are masked as heavily as you can possibly be, and they are number one in deaths per 100K. Now, if that had been the opposite, if New Jersey had never had any kind of mask mandate and they were number one in deaths per 100K, we'd never hear the end of that. Never hear the end of that. Well, that goes to show if you don't follow the science, you have all these deaths. But in this case, instead of saying, wow, I guess masks don't do any good, they just ignore it and say, look, we know the masks work. Do we?
You know how I know that people are, well, the powers that be are scared of those charts? Because you did 3 speeches last year that I thought were devastating to the people advocating for this. And I happened to be there for every one of them, which was pretty cool. But that last one where you just went after chart after chart after chart, that's the only one that got taken down. That's the only one that YouTube took down.
Yeah. Yeah. That is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because that one just kills them. So I am thinking of putting out next week sometime, actually, a screencast video recorded, not in front of an audience, but from my home, where I'm going to run through maybe 20 charts. And this time I'll just say, look, I'm not drawing any conclusions here. You draw whatever inference you like. I'm just showing you the charts. That's all. These are charts. They're from the WHO or they're from the New York Times. I mean, these are charts from sources that we're all told to revere. So I'm just following the rules here. And if you look at them, you might, I think maybe these could generate interesting discussions with your friends. Of course, I'll just be playful the whole time because it's obvious what the charts are telling you. None of it does anything.
Yeah. And
by the way, when this all started, I can't say that I could have hoped to see that the results of these things would have been so clearly invisible. I thought maybe, all right, maybe they'll have some moderate effect, but the price will be too great. Yeah, maybe they'll do some mitigation, but geez, the damage they do in other parts of society is going to more than outweigh. No. I didn't even have to. It turns out I didn't even need to analyze it that deeply. You look at these charts, you compare different places, or you look at people's mobility and you track that, and you see that people's mobility does not correspond to anything in these curves ever, not ever, does not correspond. Or when you get the UK saying, oh, look at our curve coming down because of our lockdown. Wow, the UK's lockdown was so good, Pete, that it even brought the US's cases down at exactly the same time. But anyway, yeah, I thought, well, okay, maybe, we'll look at the charts and those places will do a little bit better. And no, there's just no connection at all. There's just nothing. Even I figured it would do some good. It might do some good. And it turns out I was giving him too much credit.
Well, you talked about, you mentioned New York, London, and that they're going to come back. But I mean, we both know that the economy is not a light switch. You don't just turn it on.
Oh, yeah, no. I just mean, I wouldn't want to live there, but tourists will be able to visit and do things. And,
sure.
At this point in my life, I'm looking out for number one here, and I'm thinking about. And by the way, during this thing, I've had a lot of opportunities to help a lot of people who really were suffering and struggling. I mean, it's almost providential that I wound up having a pretty darn good year, and I was able to bail a lot of desperate people out of terrible situations. And ever since I started going back out to eat, I tip way. I mean, I was always a generous tipper, but now it's like over the top, ridiculous. Just because I feel like I know you guys have suffered and life is hard, and you deal with jerks who are concerned that your mask is below your nose and whatever, so dealing with the public is more irritating than ever. And that's just my way of saying, I'm sorry about that, but some of us are cheering for you.
When you look at the town you live in right now, how many restaurants or businesses have you seen that have disappeared, shuttered?
That's a good question. Honestly, because I live in a culinary wasteland, I don't keep track of the restaurants that well.
Go north a little bit to Orlando, and
all right, I've seen one or two in my town, but I do know there's a wonderful little lunch place, cute little lunch place in St. Cloud called Velma's Diner. It's only been open a few years, and it's the cutest little breakfast and lunch diner in the world. They've got 9 tables, and there's no point in wearing a mask, even if you wanted to, because your table is 3 paces from the door. So there would be really no point in wearing it. And I know that they're still open, but they're really struggling because their clientele tended to be older. And it's the older folks that have tended to stay home. So if you cater to that particular demographic, it's been particularly bad. So the number of restaurants that are open might not tell the whole story. It's how, let's give it another 6 months and see how many just find that they just couldn't hang on. They just couldn't hang on long enough. But I can say in my area, and this could well be thanks to DeSantis, it's been okay. It looks like they are holding on. Whereas I wonder what the carnage is like in California.
Well, I think Mark Claire said that, or I can't remember whose show it was on. It might have been Thaddeus's show, that like 50 to 75% of the small independent restaurants have closed in LA.
That's insane.
Yeah, that's nuts. I mean, and anyone who's ever thought about opening a restaurant and really like got down in the weeds of the numbers to see what kind of what kind of margins you would have knows that most restaurants are operating on shoestring. I mean, 10% at most. And I mean, I just couldn't see how any of them were going to, especially ones that are paying insane amounts of rent for brick and mortar. Because, our friend Gene Epstein, Hisako has a building, and there's a restaurant in the building that she rents out. And I know exactly how much a month she was getting for that before, in rent, before all this started. And it was a considerable sum. I mean, they had to bring it down in order just to keep those good tenants in there.
Yeah. Well, in terms of restaurants, of course, you're right. Everybody knows restaurants operate on razor thin margins, even under the ideal conditions. And now having people panicked or saying you can open your restaurant at 25% capacity. Are you kidding me? 25% capacity? What do you expect to happen to me? And then it turns out, then they've looked, and the number of cases they can trace to restaurants is like borderline invisible. So all of this is just, it's all been nuttiness and craziness, and it's I think frankly inferior people who are afraid to have their own thoughts and who want to make themselves seem superior to genuinely decent people. And when I say inferior people, I'm talking morally. These are morally bad people that they exploit a situation like this to try to demonstrate their superiority to others. But in the course of doing that, they cheer on the destruction of countless lives and people, all in the blissful ignorance of just being completely unaware of how utterly ineffective all the barbarism has been.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't think of a better place to end it than right there. Do you want to, you already mentioned one ebook. Do you want to mention that one again, or do you want to mention a different one?
Yeah,
what do you want to plug?
Yeah, this is the thing people should get, because you're going to find it immensely satisfying. I mean, it just takes a 2x4 to their heads. But we're talking metaphorically here, and you can tell what it's about from the title: COVID charts CNN forgot. By the way, it's hard to put a thing together. Like there are a couple of dozen charts in this thing, and when you lay them out, you got to look at all the charts and say, well, how do I arrange them so that they tell a story? And it took a while to do this, but you're gonna get something out of it. So you can get that two ways: either chartstheyforgot.com, or in the US, all you have to do is text the word "forgot" to the number 33444, and you'll get it sent to you that way.
Tom, I appreciate you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, Pete.
I want to thank you for tuning into the Free Man Be on the Wall podcast. I want to thank Tom for coming back on the show. That's it. Be back in a few days with another episode. Take care, and bye.